You could launch a colony with volunteers, convicts, refugees, zealots, workers, or pioneers, but sooner or later, their children inherit the mission. That may sound like a small distinction, but for an interstellar colony, it might be the whole problem. The people who launched the mission may choose the destination, sign the charter, design the ship, pick the cargo, and write the speeches about destiny among the stars. They may be brave pioneers, eager to shape a new world, but a century later, when that ship arrives, many of the people aboard may not be those original volunteers at all. They may be the children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, people born in metal corridors under artificial light, raised on recycled air, who have never seen a sunrise except on a screen. Earth is not home to them. This is not Mars or the Moon, where they can realistically visit Earth or keep up daily correspondence with family and friends there. At the interstellar scale, without fast light travel, Earth is an origin story, a history lesson, maybe a holy land, maybe a cautionary tale, or maybe just the place their grandparents were obsessed with, or obsessed with leaving. And yet those people may be expected to climb down onto a new world and build the civilization their ancestors imagined. That is the first-generation problem. Not just how do you govern a colony, but who gets to shape the values of the people who did not choose the mission, but will inherit all of its consequences. Should you even try? Can it be done? And if it can be done, should it be done? Or do you dare not try? Because a colony ship is not just a vehicle. After a few births and funerals, it becomes a country with engines. For the launch generation, the ship is transportation. For the first generation born aboard, it is home. For the second or third, it may be the only home their family has ever known. The destination star might be the point of the whole mission, but to them, it is a place no one has visited, selected by dead politicians, distant mission planners, or grandparents who insisted that one day everyone would understand. Needless to say, that may not go smoothly. Children of the Ark. Let's imagine a fairly modest Ark ship leaving Earth with 10,000 people aboard and taking a century to reach its destination. If its population grows at about 1% per year, roughly in the range of recent modern human global growth, it arrives at about 27,000 people. 20 years after landing, if that growth continues, it has about 33,000. A century after landing, about 73,000. Those are not absurd numbers. We are not talking about a billion people stuck into a tin can like cosmic sardines. We have episodes discussing vastly larger generation ships and Ark swarms, and it is a favorite topic here, so make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notifications if that sounds as fun to you as it does to us. But for today's discussion, the raw number matters less than the ratio. The ship that left Earth with 10,000 volunteers arrives with a population mostly made up of people who never volunteered. Even if the original passengers have life extension technology, and many of them are still alive at arrival, they are no longer the whole colony. They might even be most of it. For that younger majority, the mission is inherited rather than chosen. They may respect it, they may love it, they may have been raised to see it as sacred. They did not sign up for it. And that is using a fairly gentle growth rate. If we use 10% instead, which has been quite common for frontier pioneer populations, and is not especially high for groups that value large families and have room to grow, then that same 10,000 people becomes about 72,000 after a century. 20 years after arrival, they are over 100,000. After 2 centuries, they're around 500,000. Even if the trip is much slower, say only a couple percent of light speed to a nearby star, and it takes 4 centuries from departure to being reasonably settled on the new planet, we are still not necessarily talking about a giant civilization. At 1% growth, that is a few 100,000 people. At 2%, it is huge by colony standards, but still not Earth-sized. Either way, it is large enough to have factions, generations, institutions, and political arguments, while still small enough that every major choice feels personal. You would either know your supreme leader personally, or know people who did. At 2% growth, that is a very different ship than the one that launched, or more likely a ship with a lot of added habitats, frozen passengers, strict birth rules, or other rules and laws they made as the situation demanded, or some very tense family planning committees. And remember, those growth rates are net growth, births minus deaths. If advanced medicine or life extension keeps birth rates the same but drives the death rate close to zero, growth can jump fast. A society with a net 1% growth rate might actually have something like a 1.7% birth rate and a 0.7% death rate. Drop deaths near zero, and your 10,000 people become about 54,000 in a century instead of 27,000. A high birth pioneer society that normally nets around 2% might behave more like 3.5% if hardly anyone dies, and then 10,000 people becomes over 300,000 in a century. That also means all those older folks are still around, and if life extension keeps them vigorous in mind and body, they're not just beloved elders in rocking chairs telling stories about Earth for the 10th time. They may still be administrators, engineers, officers, judges, teachers, landholders, investors, clergy, faction leaders, or the people who know the command codes. A century or two in, they might be only a few percent of the population, but still hold most of the cards of power and influence. That matters. The stress of younger generations living under near immortal ancestors who remain actively involved in everything could be enormous. And because those elders really do have wisdom and experience, they are hard to push aside legitimately. You might get a layering effect, where the original founders tell their children to wait, those children tell their children to wait, and everyone is assured that a whole new world is waiting for them at the end of the journey. So patience is a virtue. Of course, if hardly anyone dies, you also run into a much more physical problem: room. A generation ship already has to worry about population control. A life-extended generation ship, a Methuselah ship, has to worry about it even more. You can expand the habitat if the ship was designed for that, and many probably would be. You can freeze excess population until arrival. Some folks would probably volunteer out of boredom. You can encourage delayed childbearing. You might even upload minds into archives or virtual existences for later restoration to android, biodroid, or cloned bodies. Options we should not casually dismiss in a setting already advanced enough to send arc ships between stars. But in all of these cases, population policy is not a side issue. It is mission architecture. It is life support, housing, agriculture, education, inheritance, voting rights, and whether the ship is still a ship or has quietly become a traveling civilization. Now, any competent arc ship designer knows this. You do not send a century-long mission without modeling population growth. But it is one thing to model people as dots in a spreadsheet, and another to tell your daughter that she can't have a third child because the carbon budget says no, or to tell your grandson that he must become a planetary farmer because someone on Earth decided that was the family's role before he was born. I should also note that population modeling and forecasting has a track record that's not terribly impressive compared to anything other than reading tea leaves, so your ship probably has to put some genuine effort into trying to hit the numbers they're expecting to have. This is also where the legitimacy problem begins. If the original charter says the mission is to settle Planet B around Star X, but by arrival most living adults were born aboard, or would rather remain in orbit, settle the moons, continue to another star, or turn the ship into a permanent mobile habitat, what then? The founders have a point. Without mission discipline, the whole enterprise may fail. You cannot treat an interstellar colony ship like a road trip, where everyone votes every hour on whether to stop at the next gas station. The ship exists because generations before them made enormous sacrifices, and survival may require sticking to the plan. And to be fair, this is hardly limited to civilizations living on arc ships, but the shipborne generation has a point too. They are not cargo, they are citizens. A mission can be inherited, but moral consent is harder to inherit. Parents can pass on property, language, religion, culture, and obligations, but there's always a limit to how tightly the dead hand of one generation can grip the living hand of the next. And often, it will feel like they are gripping your throat, not your hand. The dead hand of the founders. We see this dead hand influence in ordinary history all the time, though on much shorter timelines. The American founders, themselves heavily influenced by thinkers of prior times and places, wrote a constitution for a small coastal republic of farms, ports, towns, and a few million people in the late 18th century. They were brilliant men, flawed men, practical men, and men of their own era, but they were not writing with railroads, telegraphs, industrialism, mass immigration, nuclear weapons, the internet, or artificial intelligence sitting on the table in front of them. The Reconstruction era a century later faced problems the founders had not solved, and in some cases had very deliberately postponed. The Gilded Age faced giant corporations, urban machines, and industrial labor conflicts that would have looked alien to much of the founding generation. The Great Depression forced arguments about banking, welfare, federal power, and economic emergency that belonged to a different world from 1789. After World War II, the United States had to think in terms of superpower alliances, nuclear deterrence, global trade, civil rights, mass media, the space race, and institutions at a scale the early republics simply did not possess. After the Cold War, and especially in the digital era, we got still another set of problems and tools to contend with. This does not mean the founders were useless, quite the opposite. Good founding principles are valuable precisely because they can guide people through problems the founders never personally imagined. But it does suggest that founders should be careful about trying to micromanage the future. A founding generation can give descendants tools, can give them principles. It can warn them about human nature, tyranny, faction, corruption, panic, and the temptations of power. But if it tries to script every answer in advance, it may not be preserving wisdom. It may just be preserving obsolete assumptions. That is even more true on a colony ship. The people who plan the mission may have known less about the destination than the people arriving there. The shipborne generation may have better surveys, better instruments, better robotics, different medical technology, different threats, and a century of lived experience their ancestors lacked. They may have grown up with failures and emergencies the mission planners never anticipated, including insights from neighboring colony missions. They may be less romantic about the dream, but more competent about the reality. So if they say the original plan no longer works, they might be cowards or rebels or short-sighted opportunists. Or they may be right. The curriculum is the Constitution. This is why education becomes one of the most important pieces of the whole puzzle. In a normal society, education matters. In a new colony, education may be the quietest form of founding power. Who teaches the first generation what the mission means? Their parents, the captain, the colony authority, the AI tutor system, the churches, unions, guilds, universities, military officers, corporate sponsors, or Earth governments that funded the expedition. It is easy to picture a colony charter as the founding document. The first real constitution may be the curriculum. What children are taught to admire, fear, obey, question, preserve, and reject will shape their civilization long before they hold their first election. And aboard a ship, values are never merely abstract. On Earth, wasting water is bad manners or bad policy. On a ship, wasting water is a survival problem beyond what any desert culture ever considered, with the possible exception of Arrakis. On Earth, skipping a maintenance check may be laziness. On a ship, it may be a crime. On Earth, a teenager doing something stupid in a field may break a fence. On a ship, a teenager doing something stupid near the wrong valve may kill 1,000 people. That changes moral instincts, and we have plenty of life and death examples from rougher times of our own history to know how harsh rules can get if they're seen, rightly or not, as truly life and death for a community. A ship society will tend to teach caution, procedure, conservation, and respect for technical authority. It will likely make maintenance almost sacred, or even sacred. It may treat failing to recycle as a loathsome crime. It may teach children that privacy has limits, because everyone's body, air, waste, food, health, and behavior affect everyone else's survival. Those are not necessarily bad values. In a closed habitat, they may be excellent values. They can also become authoritarian values very easily. And being a ship, which by default is run by a captain and a traditional naval hierarchy, isn't likely to make that any easier. That's why so many of our episodes on interstellar colonization, particularly our Unity series, tend to dive into characters, people, and cultural pressure issues. The core of our Gardener ship concept from that series is that it builds around the idea of repeated division and schism of your colony group as an integral design feature rather than a problem you're trying to fix. Even that still has decades-long journeys between stops where things can go all wrong. A society can say, we are only teaching safety, while quietly teaching obedience. It can say, we are preserving the mission, while actually preserving the political preferences of the people who control the schools. It can say, we are teaching Earth history, while selecting only the parts of Earth that flatter the colony's ideology. And the children may not know the difference until much later. Arrival shock. That becomes especially important at arrival, because arrival is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of the crisis. For a century, the ship has rewarded certain virtues: discipline, conservation, conformity, centralized authority, and risk avoidance. Then suddenly the colony needs other virtues: initiative, expansion, local judgment, experimentation, and a willingness to fail in ways that would have been unacceptable aboard the ship. The skills change too. You don't actually need any colony building skills for that first century. You just need a means of preserving the knowledge and maybe a decent number of instructors. There are skills you need for running a ship and ones for building a colony that overlap, and only a fool doesn't keep both decently active, but there's no reason to have 1,000 geologists on board your colony fleet if you won't need them till 200 years after you left. And that principle will apply to a lot of areas, and also by its nature to a lot of social status and life focus. On the ship, everyone depends on the same life support, and the experts at that are well respected. On a planet, or even across a new star system, people can spread out, and new skills and new ambitions and drives emerge. One settlement may want to begin terraforming immediately, another may want to preserve the native chemistry until they understand it better, another may prefer orbital habitats, another may settle an icy moon because that's where the volatiles are, another may decide the original planetary focus was always a mistake, and that the real wealth is in asteroids, comets, and solar power. Suddenly, the command structure that made sense in transit looks heavy-handed, or the local autonomy that makes sense on the frontier looks reckless to people raised in a world where every mistake endangered everyone. And people are unlikely to universally agree on which is the case. The virtues that keep a ship alive may be exactly the virtues that make a planetary frontier stagnate, and the virtues that build a frontier may be exactly the ones that will get everyone killed aboard the ship. This is where the first generation may split, not just politically, but psychologically. Some will say, "At last, we are free of the ship." Others will say, "The ship was civilization, and now you want us to scatter into pressure domes and mud pits." Some will see the planet as destiny, others will see it as a resource, others will see it as a trap, and some may want the ship to leave again. The ship that keeps going. That is one of the more interesting versions of this problem. Imagine a colony ship arriving at its destination, refueling, repairing, building new material stockpiles, and then splitting its population. Half stayed to build the colony, half remain aboard and continue to another star. This is our Garner ship concept, or a Garner fleet once it scales up into armadas that build more ships and subdivide down the millennia. So too, a colony has not just a whole planet, but a whole star system to spread out to. So they likely subdivide a lot too, and probably know they find talking to their neighbors more irritating than packing up to a new spot. Regardless, now you do not have one successful civilization, you have two or more. The settlers will say, "We fulfilled the mission." The folks on the ship say, "We are continuing the mission." Both may be right. The settled colony has the planet, the flag, the first city, the farms, the mines, and the graves of the first dead buried under an alien sky. The ship has the engines, the archives, the continuity of the voyage, maybe the original command deck, maybe the oldest living founders, maybe the embryos and tools for future colonies. One becomes a place, the other becomes a moving homeland. Every colony the ship seeds afterward may inherit part of that ship culture, its songs, laws, maintenance rituals, slang, taboos, and old arguments may spread from star to star. But each settled world will mutate those traditions almost immediately. After a few centuries, the ship might be remembered as a sacred ancestral vessel by some, a cowardly deserter by others, and a meddling old relic by its own descendants. The moment the ship leaves again, the founding myth splits in two. One half says we stayed, the other says we carried the flame onward. Sleeping founders. Cryo ships seem like they might avoid all of this. Put everyone to sleep, fly to the star, wake them up, and the same people who left Earth are the people who arrive. No awkward shipborne majority, no grandchildren asking why they are obligated to fulfill a mission they never chose. Or at least if they do now, they complain about being stuck on a planet rather than a ship. But cryoships only partly avoid the problem. Someone still wakes up first. If the colony world needs preparation for mass settlement, then robots, AI systems, or a small caretaker crew may spend years or decades building the first habitats. Maybe they need to set up power, agriculture, landing zones, factories, orbital mirrors, medical facilities, or basic surveys before waking everyone. If 10,000 colonists are frozen, but the settlement can safely wake only a few hundred at first, that first cohort has enormous influence. They get to name the first town, they assign the first jobs, they decide which emergencies justify bending the charter, they decide who wakes next, they may decide who wakes at all. Do they wake engineers first, doctors, farmers, soldiers, families, politicians, children, young adults likely to have more children, the elderly who helped fund the mission, the official governor, the people best suited to survival, or the people with the strongest legal claim? Even if everyone agreed before launch, the situation of arrival may be different. A damaged ship, a harsher planet, limited food, a malfunctioning medical bay, or new data about the system can make the wake-up order political. New technologies from home may change what specialists you need to wake up and how many of them. An entire job may have been rendered obsolete by that new tech, so those once valued specialists do not get woken up until you have enough surplus people to help retrain them. To help mitigate that, you probably train your colonists to have at least one good secondary skill. But a secondary skill that you're pretty decent at is not the same as a specialty for which you were considered an expert. Cryosleep preserves bodies, but does not necessarily preserve status or equality. By the time the last sleepers wake, the first awakened group may have built the town, written the emergency rules, trained the robots, assigned the land, and had children. Those children may already think of themselves as the real first generation of the colony, while the late awakened colonists feel like they arrived to find their own future already under different management. Children raised by ghosts. Then there is the stranger version, the embryo colony. No adult colonists go at all. Instead, a robotic seed ship flies to the star, builds the first habitat, grows children from stored embryos, and raises them with AI tutors, robot caregivers, synthetic environments, and recorded lessons from humanity. I would bet we have the technology to attempt something like this before the 22nd century, though how well it would work is another matter entirely, and science fiction has painted some fairly vivid pictures of how badly it could go wrong. It might also be one of the cheapest ways to colonize other stars. Adults are heavy, life support is heavy, cryonics may be difficult and is also heavy. A seed ship carrying embryos, machines, databases, and factory equipment might be far smaller than a crude ark. But morally and culturally, it is the purest form of the first generation problem. There are no living founders present, no parents who remember Earth, no grandparents who tell stories about oceans, cities, farms, wars, churches, nations, or summer evenings under a familiar sky. Humanity is not a memory, it is a curriculum. Those children are raised by whatever their designers choose to preserve. Which language do they speak? Possibly one made by linguists to be more efficient than the existing ones on Earth, since the occasion gives you a chance at a fresh start. But which holidays do they celebrate? Which religions are taught, if any? Which political systems are presented as normal? Which parts of history are emphasized? What parts are softened, skipped, or explained away? Are they taught to love Earth, obey Earth, surpass Earth, avenge Earth, ignore Earth, or merely know that Earth existed? Or maybe not, you might hide the existence of Earth from distant colonies, in case they go all wrong and you don't feel like getting visits from them. Do they see the AI as parent, teacher, servant, god, jailer, or ancestral ghost? And what happens if they grow up and realize their entire childhood was mission design? A normal child eventually learns their parents are flawed people. An embryo colony child may eventually learn that the whole society was assembled by committees, engineers, donors, ideologues, and software teams who decided what healthy human culture should look like before the first baby opens its eyes. An embryo colony is not founded by settlers, it's founded by lesson plans, machine patience, and whatever assumptions the launched civilization forgot it was making. This does not mean it would fail. Indeed, it might work very well if done carefully. Children are adaptable, machines might be patient, kind, consistent, and very good at education. A library of human culture can be vast. Virtual environments might let them walk through simulations of Earth's cities, forests, farms, temples, museums, and battlefields. But they would still be a new people. Not fake humans, not lesser humans, but humans whose founding memories were designed rather than inherited in the ordinary messy way. Now, for those finding this grim, especially after the point about it probably being cheaper than an ARC ship. Let me add a little bit of comfort. This same sort of impressive automation that makes this vaguely possible also lets you have robots building giant ARC ships. Cost in post-scarcity civilizations does not follow our intuitive assumptions much. If folks are employing this method, my guess is because they think it does the job better rather than cheaper. And I don't think most folks would consider AI better parents than humans. More likely, they think children are raised better when human parents have AI assistants, robotic nannies, and upgrades on the thousands of little child-rearing conveniences we already have that our ancestors did not. In a wider sense, that's a key point for our discussion today. I don't think many colonies will get started without a lot of driving passion for them, not at the interstellar scale. Settling other star systems can have a lot of motivations. I think any colony would have several. Indeed, most colonists individually likely would too. But an indifference to building new worlds and communities is likely a rarity in those initial volunteers. Their descendants might not feel the same. And for that matter, the volunteers might change their minds during long and hard journeys too. The first generation born aboard an interstellar ship may inherit a culture and identity very different from the people who launched it, and that raises questions about what counts as human, what counts as a person, and how far either definition can stretch. Those are questions we've explored in episodes like What is Sentience, Synthetic Life, and Post-Human Species, all gathered in our Alien Life collection on Nebula. And in Outsider Aliens, we take the idea farther still, asking about beings evolved under entirely different physical laws, perhaps needing an artificial body or an interface simply to exist here. That episode is out now exclusively on Nebula, where every SFA episode premieres early and ad-free, alongside years of extended editions and bonus content. Use my link or QR code to get 50% off an annual plan. Just $30 for the whole year. Who really shapes the future? A ship society rewards caution and maintenance. A future colony rewards initiative and adaptation. A terraforming project rewards patience and long-term thinking. A fragile dome city rewards discipline. A scattered asteroid culture rewards independence and technical competence. A colony that nearly died from factionalism may treat unity as sacred. A colony that nearly died from authoritarian incompetence may treat liberty as sacred. Often what keeps people alive becomes virtue, and what nearly kills them becomes taboo. And this is why no founder really controls the future. Not completely. They can write the charter, they can design the school system, they can select the embryos, train the AI, appoint the governor, and put heroic statues in the main plaza. They can load the archives with speeches about the mission and songs about Earth. They can try to bind the colony with law, myth, loyalty, or fear. But the first generation will still have to live there. They will know which rules work and which are ceremonial leftovers. They will know which emergency procedures save lives and which ones exist because some committee panicked a century ago. They will know whether the governor is wise or merely old. They will know whether Earth's instructions are still relevant or have become advice from a dead relative who never visited the neighborhood. Life extension makes that tension sharper. The founders may still be there centuries later with the experience, institutional memory, old friendships, command codes, and prestige to remain useful, and to remain very hard to move aside. That can be a blessing, because a colony is a dangerous place to have amateurs relearning every painful lesson from scratch. It would almost become the founder lock-in, where the people who remember the launch keep treating everyone born afterward as juniors in a mission that now belongs to them too. This is where humility matters. A wise founding generation does not merely ask, how do we make our descendants obey? It asks, how do we give them enough structure to survive and enough freedom to correct our mistakes? Because they will have better information about their own problems than the founders did. That does not mean they will be wiser. Every generation is perfectly capable of being foolish in fresh and exciting ways, but they will be closer to the facts on the ground. They will know the colony's actual weather, actual resources, actual population, actual failures, actual enemies, actual machines, and actual temptations. Of course, they could misinterpret things or live in self-denial. That's not likely to be a trait that eliminates itself in the future, though one can always hope. Founders should absolutely pass down principles. Do not murder each other over faction. Do not break the life support system. Do not let one charismatic lunatic seize the oxygen supply. Do not abandon education. Do not turn it into indoctrination. Do not forget where you came from. Do not assume every new technology is safe just because it is useful. Do not assume every old rule is wise just because it is old. Do not assume every new sounding idea is better just because it still has that new car smell. But trying to control descendants too tightly can backfire. A future generation with free will, better tools, different conditions, and a very different culture may not thank you for wrapping their whole civilization in antique caution tape. And if they come to see the founding charter as a cage, they may not amend it gently, they may smash it. So, who shapes a new civilization's values? Not one person, unless we are talking about a hive mind maybe. Not even one generation, not even just the people. The environment shapes it by rewarding some behaviors and punishing others. Emergencies shape it because nothing becomes sacred faster than the thing that saved everyone last time. And the first generation shapes it by deciding which inherited rules are wisdom, which are fear, and which are just the preferences of dead people with impressive titles. That is the real first-generation problem. It is not merely that children might rebel against parents. That happens everywhere. It is that on a strange new world, those arguments become founding history. And that is why any civilization setting out for another sun should think very carefully about what it teaches, what it commands, what it forbids, and what it leaves open. Because the people who inherit that mission are not simply passengers. They are not merely the descendants of the founders. They are the founders of everything that comes next.